Invisible messenger on Wall Street. Michael carries a tarnished last name and an inherited notebook with 3 words. Liquidity is dignity. When subtle signs start flashing, he must choose between staying silent or honoring his father, and find out if character still means anything amidst dollar signs. Michael Turner adjusted the worn-out backpack on his shoulder as he navigated through the sea of dark suits on Broadway. The badge hanging from his chest, Messenger, Sterling and Cole, swung like a constant reminder of where his life stood at 32. It wasn't what he had dreamed of as a child, nor what his father had envisioned for him. A Turner never shies away from risk, the old banker used to say with that confident smile that seemed unshakable, until everything collapsed. The Turner name, once associated with a respected family bank in the countryside, now only evoked whispers of failure. Michael had inherited not properties or investments, but debts and looks of pity. From his father's old mahogany office desk, only a worn leather-covered notebook remained, filled with the elegant and determined handwriting of John Turner. On a page yellowed by time, a phrase underlined 3 times caught the eye: liquidity is dignity. Michael kept that notebook as a sailor keeps a compass. The Sterling and Cole Tower loomed imposingly against the gray Manhattan sky. On the 32nd floor, the Temple of Traders dominated an entire space. Dozens of monitors displayed numbers, charts, and trends that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. There, shouts pierced the air conditioning, and words like spread, put, and volatility were thrown like projectiles. To those people, Michael was just the coffee guy, the one who stamped documents, rode the elevators up and down with confidential envelopes, the invisible one who kept the machinery running yet was never recognized as part of it. Look who's here, the heir to bankruptcy. Lucas Grant's voice echoed across the hall as Michael tried to pass discreetly with a tray of coffees. Lucas, 38, was the star of the credit desk. Perfectly combed hair, Swiss watch on his wrist, and a smile that hid teeth as sharp as his market operations. Behind him, 2 analysts laughed while others pretended to be too busy to notice the embarrassment. Be careful not to spill that tray like your father spilled that bank, Turner, Lucas added, eliciting more laughter. Michael forced a toothless smile. Those daily humiliations were the price he paid for the salary that kept his small apartment in Queens and the installments of the debt his father had left behind. Coffee, Mr. Grant? She responded, keeping her voice neutral. Lucas took the cup with disdain. If you want to learn how to make real money, jot this down: courage and leverage. That's what Wall Street thrives on, not messages and stamps. Michael nodded silently. Courage he knew well. It took a lot of it to wake up every day and face that hostile environment. As for leverage, his father's words echoed in his mind. Leverage is like fire, son. It can warm an entire house or burn it to ashes. That night, in his 1-bedroom apartment overlooking a brick wall, Michael served himself instant noodles while going through his father's notebook. Among notes on market cycles and credit evaluations, he found a yellowed handwritten note. For Michael, when I am no longer here. Play the fool among the proud, but never sell your soul for applause. The market always charges interest on arrogance. His fingers traced the words as if touching a sacred relic. The tears came, silent, as he remembered his father sitting on the porch of the house they had to sell, staring at the horizon with empty eyes after the bank went under. On a seemingly ordinary Wednesday, the market was strangely calm, like an animal crouching before it attacks. Michael walked down the hallway on the 32nd floor with a sealed envelope addressed to Grace Whitman, the risk director at Sterling & Cole. Grace, 45, was a woman of few words and many decisions. She wore her hair short and practical, and her gray eyes seemed capable of seeing through lies and doctored balance sheets. She was feared and respected in equal measure, a rarity in that predominantly male environment. As he passed by the trading floor, Michael slowed his pace. Something on the main panel caught his eye. Amidst the dominant green, small red dots began to pulse on one of the secondary charts, the credit spreads line widening in specific sectors. It was subtle, almost imperceptible to someone who didn't know what to look for. But Michael knew. It reminded him of the scribbles in his father's notebook. When liquidity risk blinks, the price becomes a detail. Get out, hole. Across the room, Lucas was gesturing animatedly to his team. It's just market noise, folks. By the dip, let's increase positions. Michael felt a knot in his stomach. He continued on his way to Grace's office, lightly knocking on the frosted glass door. Excuse me, Mrs. Whitman. I brought the fund guarantees update for X and Z. Grace looked up from her computer screen. Her critical gaze assessed Michael as she evaluated risk spreadsheets. Leave it there, Michael. Thank you. He placed the envelope on the table but didn't move. He hesitated, considering whether he should speak. It wasn't his role. It wasn't his place. Forgive me, it's not my place. He began in a low voice. But the spreads, He searched for the right word, distorting. Very quickly. Grace frowned, surprised to hear such a remark coming from a messenger. Before she could respond, the door opened and Lucas entered, vibrant like an athlete after a victory. Grace, dear, close your eyes and trust. Today is the day to get rich. We don't need the lockdown that your team suggests. It's just momentary panic. Grace's gaze returned to Michael, who remained beside the table. Lucas noticed and his smile faded. What is he doing here? He asked, with a forced laugh. Did he come to deliver coffee and inherited apocalyptic predictions? Michael swallowed hard. Just deliveries, he said, in a low voice. And an observation. Observation, Lucas approached, filling the space with his intimidating presence. Observe this. Anyone who makes a mistake leaves the table. There is no place for provincial superstition here. Grace interrupted, her voice sharp. Thank you, Michael. You can go. In the elevator, his hands were still trembling. He closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. He remembered his father, the heavy hand on his shoulder when he was 15 and had lost a math competition. It's not defeat that defines a man, Michael. It's how he gets up after it. That night, he opened the notebook and reread a newspaper clipping pasted on one of the pages. The day the flow dried up, a report on the liquidity crisis that led many institutions to bankruptcy, including his father's bank. Below, a scribbled prayer. Lord, deliver us from confusing courage with arrogance. On Thursday, the market woke up furious. An unexpected piece of news. A large sovereign fund had reduced strategic positions and liquidity chains collapsed like dominoes, spread panic through the corridors of Sterling and Cole. What Lucas had called noise was now a deafening scream. Forced sales, desperate calls, margin notifications arriving in a cascade. Lucas's desk, exposed up to its neck in leveraged operations, was bleeding red. The terminals looked like pools of negative numbers. It's transient, he insisted, sweat staining his impeccable shirt. Hold the positions. Michael was running through the corridors with emergency envelopes, margin calls, guarantee terms, letters to panicked clients. Amid the rush, the unexpected happened. The elevator that would take him to the legal department stalled between floors. After agonizing minutes, a technician managed to open the door just enough for him to escape. But he wasn't on the intended floor. He had stopped in the basement of the dead file. Next to the elevator, several stacked boxes caught his attention. One of them had a yellowed label, Toner Bank, Absorbed Documentation, 2012. Michael's heart raced. They were the files of his father's bank, absorbed by Sterling and Cole after its bankruptcy. With his phone's flashlight, he quickly examined the contents. One folder stood out, Liquidity Addendums, Counterparties Series G. Inside, he found a forgotten document, an early termination addendum for liquidity stress, signed by counterparties with which Lucas's desk was now heavily negotiating. The document required action within very short windows after certain market triggers were hit, triggers that had been reached on that chaotic morning. If the firm executed the addendum in time, it could close part of the toxic swaps with minimal penalties. If it missed the deadline, it would be subject to potentially catastrophic losses. Michael gulped. His hands trembled as he photographed the pages with his phone. He checked the clock. The triggers had been activated at 10:13 a.m., and the deadline would expire at 11 a.m., less than 20 minutes. He ran up the emergency stays, his heart pounding against his chest. He found Grace in the crisis room, surrounded by monitors and panicked lawyers. Ms. Whitman, he said, breathless. I found this in the Toner legacy file. The triggers were hit at 10:13 a.m. The deadline is at 11 a.m. She read quickly, her eyes gradually widening. Her gaze sharpened. Are you sure about this? I do. Michael's voice was steady. My father negotiated this for days like today. Grace didn't hesitate. She activated the legal team, called compliance, contacted the counterparts. On the digital clock on the wall, the minutes ticked away relentlessly. At 10:57, Sterling and Cole sent the formal notification of early termination according to the overlooked clause. On the trading floor, the news spread before the alarm turned into absolute panic. A significant part of the toxic exposure had been closed. The damage, though painful, had been contained. Lucas, pale as paper, looked at the numbers in disbelief. Where did this come from? He asked, his voice lacking the usual sarcasm. From the file, Grace answered, entering the room with determined steps. And from someone who knows the difference between courage and arrogance. Michael, standing by the door, felt his legs give way. He discreetly left, seeking refuge in the fire escape. There, between concrete and metal, he let out a deep sigh. From his pocket, he took out the newspaper clipping he kept from his father. He smiled with moist eyes. The afternoon unfolded amidst tense negotiations and frantic calls. The market remained hostile, but Sterling and Cole, thanks to the addendum activated at the last minute, avoided the worst. By evening, when most of the employees had already left, Grace called Michael into her office. There was no audience, only the respectful silence of someone who recognizes value beyond appearances. You saved this firm from something potentially devastating, Michael. She slid a new badge across the table. Starting Monday, Junior Risk Analyst. And one more thing. I want you to lead the project to review all contractual legacies. No one is better suited than someone who has already carried these envelopes to know where the hidden truths are. Michael touched the badge with reverence. He thought of his mother, now working twice as hard to help pay off debts. Of the family home sold to satisfy creditors. Of his father, sitting silently on the porch in recent days, looking beyond the horizon as if searching for answers in the sky. Thank you for the opportunity, Mrs. Whitman. His voice was laden with restrained emotion. I won't disappoint you. I know you didn't. Grace smiled slightly. Your father would be proud. Not because of the position, but because of how you reached it. Michael stiffened, surprised. You knew my father. I negotiated with him a few times. Grace glanced out the window, where the lights of Manhattan were beginning to dot the night. He was a man of integrity in an environment that doesn't always value integrity. Maybe that's why. She didn't finish, but it wasn't necessary. They both knew the end of that story. The next morning, as the firm reorganized its positions, an email circulated. Internal recognition, action of excellence. Michael's name was there, along with a brief description of what he had done. Some traders passed him in the hallway with respectful nods. Others still held their chins high, egos too bruised to acknowledge the worth of someone they once considered invisible. Lucas approached him near the water cooler, his face a mask of forced humility. Turner. The word hung heavy in the air. I underestimated you. Michael held his gaze, without hostility, but without subservience. It's not me. It's the rules we forget when everything seems easy. Lucas nodded, without a response. Sometimes, defeat is the only language that arrogance can understand. On Sunday, Michael visited the small cemetery on the outskirts of town. The simple grave of John Turner was covered with dry leaves that his son carefully removed. He sat on the damp grass, opening the leather notebook. I got a new position, Dad. His voice was gentle in the quietness of the place. Not because of what I know, but because of what I learned from you. He took a pen out of his backpack. Beneath the phrase his father had underlined, liquidity is dignity, he added his own line. Providence is when the wrong door locks, and you find the right one. The wind softly stirred the pages of the notebook, as if John Turner were flipping through memories with his son. Michael smiled, closing his eyes. There were no thunderous miracles in his story, just encounters, forgotten documents, tight deadlines, and the feeling that, Even in the smallest details, there was a greater purpose at work. That day, he understood that his father's true legacy was not in bank accounts or properties, but in the handwritten lessons in that worn notebook. On Wall Street, numbers tell stories, but it is character that decides the ending. True wealth is not the leverage that exalts, but the dignity that sustains when the market turns. And liquidity is not just a financial concept, but the ability to remain intact when everything around falls apart. Michael closed the notebook and stood up, ready to write his own chapter.